Pick this up right now, having drafted everything but the end node. So I'm going to go ahead and finally type in here. I'm going ahead and you can do draw. Of course, you have points there. Remember, the divide is right in here. It's in a point, but I'm going to put a point here at the end point there, at the end point there, and at the end point there. Now I do this, right? I've got the good base ends. In the end, I'm going to have to fill in some more points in a little bit. So let me go ahead, and you've got the nodes there. I'm not going to label up the nodes yet with using the attribute command, because basically I don't have the ones in the middle here done. So what I'm going to do is going to continue with this geometry and think about, in the end, where just not so much the direction of these lines that I'm drafting here, because in the end I'm going to be using members on top of them. So I'm just in the correct layer. I'm going to fill out a little bit more of the spine, and I'm just going to turn on my shift right click, my object snap settings to node, which is usually a pretty nice one to keep by itself if you're doing work like this. And then I'm just going to do line, and I'm just going to continue here. Lone, I'm going to turn on the object snap, go from there to there, turning off the F8, turning off the polar, turning off the dynamic. For me, y'all of course will have it on. You're welcome. Down to here, all the way up. And once again, I could mirror this basically if I really want to get good habit in drafting, but you'd really have to trust that you did everything correct. So I'm going to left, 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 left. I'm going to left click over the top of something and go down to the mirror. I'm going to do C for copy, B for base point. My new base point is going to be the node of this. And I'm going to hit F8 here with F8 on. I've drafted that up now more or less correctly, and now I'm going to go from line from the endpoint here to the endpoint. Again, I'm realizing here I'm just putting in geometry. So when I'm putting in geometry and not members, the directionness and throughness is not so important, but it's still not bad and not wrong to go ahead and break, extend, screw that, extend up. So I've got, what you've got here is you've got individual pieces. Though up here you have whole pieces, which a lot of you had in drafting, but when you put the members in as well, you had whole pieces. I'm going to finish off the end here from there. Again, as my steps are on, it's going to grab maybe not what I want. So I'm going to go from here to the node, right? And once again, I'm going to go line and the shift right click the end to the node. Alright, so you've drafted at this point the basic geometry, and if you know, I think many of you realize there that someplace out here in view or utilities or home, pushing this down, utilities, there's something called, I'm losing it out here, PD mode or PD display. I'm just going to change my PD mode, point mode, to 2 or 3 so I can see them all. And of course, you start to see how draw order starts to affect things. So I'm not going to fix the draw order right now, but we do have a couple of more nodes we can stick in at this point. So I can go to the right layer, geometry, nodes, and I can once again say point. Put my point, shift right click, object snap settings if you want to set them. They're good. Use the object snap. You're going to go from shift right click, object snap settings to the node, okay, and there's no node there, so I'm going to make sure I put a point, shift right click at the intersection. Your brain will sometimes do tricks on you. You know the node is supposed to be there in a link node drawing, and so in fact now you've got all the nodes drafted up. Alright, we're going to number these correctly, but we talked now about putting things on the correct layers. So let's go ahead and do something you're not used to so much, which is drafting lines on top of lines, and look at some efficiencies. So you're going to put in members going in the right direction eventually. So I'm just going to go ahead and go around the circle and leave the rest of these in a second. I'm going to go to geometry, members, right? I'm going to now draft a line, And once again, I'm going to check my object snap settings that I want to go just node to node. I'm going to make sure the object snap is on, and as I do a line here, I'm going to go from there. I'm turning off my ortho to there. I'm going in the right direction. Now I could have done things like arrays, but I really want to be thoughtful about things going in the right direction all the way around the pike here. And even we talked about then drawing things in the right direction was part of this, the specification there. You want to do it from the lower to the higher. If we think about these numbering around this direction, lower to higher will be this. If we number those ones in the middle. So now we've drafted these up. So if you go around the pike and then through the middle here for these two, everything is drafted in the right direction. Now, once again, you're just going to be dealing with data. So you can always get a reverse azimuth if you would, but this is worthwhile doing, especially if you've taken the time to conceptualize or number out these things going around in a big circle and then going through. All right, we now have, in effect, we have laid everything out in terms of the geometry. Everything is done but not labeled. We will do that last. We could do that first as well, but I want to leave that attribute, kind of point you out to how you go about defining a point with an attribute. So you get used to doing that. It's going to be really important as you try to pull data back and forth from thing to thing. All right, one thing we talked about then as well is putting forces in terms of a unit force. So we're going to make these force applieds, and they're always going to be in the direction. Line from the node here, and then with an F8 on, I can kind of go down here and give it a distance of 1. And I can do the same here, line here from the node from this point in a distance of 1. If you're not given a value, typically draft a 1 unit. I don't remember which was a roller joint, which was a pin joint. I generally put the pins on the left. So I'm going to go ahead now, instead of doing force applied, I'm going to do a force reactive, and then once again draft a line from there with 1 unit, and draft a line here from the endpoint with 1 unit. I'm going to do the same thing here, 1 unit. Now you start to realize, oh my gosh, do I have the things in the right spots? This is where all of a sudden you start to take full advantage of the layer toolbar, or the layer manager, whatever you want to call it, on the layer toolbar, which I'm trying to find now. Got my layers 2 there. I'm going to do a right click, turn off the layers toolbar, right click, turn the layers toolbar back on, and there it is there. Right, so learning to do this and save, we're going to make a new one, and we're going to have, all on, I guess for now, even though we don't know what what is. Close, we're going to go, we have force reactive. We might want at this point think about the radial vector, so we can go ahead and freeze out. And even freeze out here, and even freeze out there. And now we can start to think about the radial vectors. So at this point we can go to, I think it was comps radial vector, and we can draw a line, remember, from the correct spot to the point of application, and that is 1 radial vector, and the radial vector would be from the endpoint there to the endpoint there. Coming from the other side, you would be drafting a radial vector from here to the point of application. Probably a good idea to turn off your ortho when you're doing this. And then one more from the endpoint here to the point of application. Moment arms I won't draft because in effect the moment arms all lay on top of here. So now you've got basically if you think about all the different requirements, the last thing you have left then is view boxes. And so I am going to leave that. I'll just do a couple here. I'm going to turn, remember we can maybe, like this layer state, we can say here, and we can just say new just comps. We can go back here and restore. And we can start to do things a little bit more logically now when we start playing around and doing the rest of this work. So we'll finish it up in the last 10 minutes, and hopefully you're done here in 20. You had 2 hours to do it. Next time hopefully you can do it in an hour. At least get organized and think about, read down the checklist if you're having a WizKid test at work, and don't get drafting until you really think about what they're asking.